Can a parent love you only for what you give them? I found out the answer the night I lost my job, and my family's silence hit harder than anything else. I used to think love meant never having to prove yourself. That family was this sacred thing, this place where you belong no matter what. Where your worth wasn't tied to your paycheck or your achievements or how useful you were. I was wrong, and discovering that truth didn't come with screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. It came with silence. The kind of silence that follows you home from work on a Tuesday evening, when the rain is hitting your windshield and you're trying to figure out how to tell the people who raised you that you're not who they thought you were anymore. What happened next shocked even her own family. My name is Sarah, and for 32 years, I was the perfect daughter. The one who sent money home every month. The one who never missed a birthday call. The one who flew back to Chicago for every holiday, even when I could barely afford the ticket. I was the success story they told their friends about, until I wasn't. The thing about being the perfect daughter is that you don't realize you're performing until the curtain falls. You think the applause is genuine. You think the love is unconditional. You think that somewhere beneath all the expectations and demands, there's a place where you're loved simply for existing. But what happens when you can't perform anymore? What happens when the success story becomes a cautionary tale? I was about to find out. Growing up in our split-level house on Maple Street, I learned early that love had conditions. Not the obvious ones, not the clean your room where you're grounded kind. The subtle ones. The kind that seep into your bones before you're old enough to recognize them. When I was 8, I brought home a report card with 5 A's and 1 B+. My father looked at it for exactly 3 seconds before asking about the B+. Not congratulating the A's. Not celebrating that I was in the gifted program. Just, why wasn't it an A? We know you can do better, sweetheart. That phrase became the soundtrack of my childhood. Always delivered with a smile. Always wrapped in what looked like encouragement. But underneath was this message that I was perpetually falling short of some invisible standard. I remember the exact moment I understood the rules of our family. I was 10, and my friend Jessica's mom had taken us to the mall. We were at the food court, and Jessica spilled ketchup on her white sweater. Her mom laughed. Actually laughed. Said it looked like abstract art and that they'd figure out how to clean it later. When I got home and told my mother about it, she shook her head with disapproval. That's not how we do things in this family, Sarah. We take care of our belongings. We don't make careless mistakes. Even at 10, I understood. Other families had room for mistakes. Other families laughed at spilled ketchup. But in our family, everything was a test. Every action was evaluated. Every choice was measured against some standard of perfection I could never quite reach. I internalized it. Made it my religion. The pressure wasn't cruel. It was loving. That's what made it so insidious. My parents genuinely believed they were preparing me for success. They genuinely thought that by setting impossibly high standards, they were giving me the tools to excel, and I did excel. By high school, I was valedictorian, student body president, captain of the debate team. I had a full scholarship to Northwestern and a resume that made guidance counselors weep with pride. But even then, even when I was literally the best student in my class, there was always something more I could be doing. Always another achievement to unlock. Always another way to prove I was worthy of their investment. Sarah's going to Northwestern, my mother would tell people. Full scholarship. She's going to be a lawyer. Lawyer. Not because I wanted to be one. Because lawyers made money. Because successful daughters became professionals. Because that's what good families produced. I switched my major to marketing. Junior year. Told my parents I wanted to work in advertising. The disappointment was palpable, even through the phone. Marketing? Sarah, you're so much smarter than that. You could be anything. A doctor. A lawyer. Something meaningful. Meaningful. Code for lucrative. Code for impressive. Code for the kind of career that would make them proud at dinner parties. But I was 20 and finally starting to understand what I actually enjoyed. I loved the psychology of persuasion. I loved the creativity of campaigns. I loved the challenge of making people care about things they'd never heard of. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing and communications. Got hired at Henderson and Associates straight out of college. Started at $38,000 a year, which felt like a fortune until I factored in New York rent and student loans and the cost of professional clothes. By 25, I was making $80,000. By 30, I was pulling in 6 figures and had my own office with a view of the Hudson River. My parents were proud. Finally. Sarah's really made something of herself, my mother would say to her book club. She's such a good daughter. Good. That word followed me everywhere. Good grades. Good job. Good daughter. I never questioned what would happen if I stopped being good. The monthly checks to my parents started as a gesture. Dad's insurance didn't cover his back surgery completely, and Mom's part-time job at the library barely covered groceries. It felt natural to help. Family helps family, right, but somewhere along the way, those checks became expected. Then demanded. Not with words, never with words. But with the subtle shift in their voices when I'd call. The way conversations would steer toward their bills. The way my mother would mention, casually, that the car needed new tires or that the roof was leaking. We wouldn't ask if we had any other choice, honey. You know that. I knew. And I paid. The first payment was $200. Just to help with the surgery deductible. Then $300 to fix the water heater. Then $500 when Dad's car broke down. By my 28th birthday, I was sending $800 home every month like clockwork, for 7 years. I paid. Through my own student loans. Through my own car payments. Through the months when I ate ramen for dinner so I could send them something extra for Christmas. I told myself it was love. That this was what family meant. That their pride in me was real, even if it only seemed to surface when I was writing checks. I should have seen the signs. The way they'd light up when I visited, but only after asking how work was going. The way my achievements were measured not by my happiness, but by my salary. The way conversations about my personal life, my dating, my friendships, my dreams, were always cut short in favor of discussions about my future and my potential. I remember bringing home a guy I'd been dating for 3 months. David. He was a teacher at a public school in Brooklyn. Kind, funny, passionate about education. The kind of person who made me feel like I could be myself. My father's first question wasn't about his character or how he treated me. It was about his salary. Teaching, huh? That's noble. But how do you make ends meet on a teacher's salary? David laughed it off. Said he wasn't in it for the money. Said he loved working with kids and that job satisfaction was worth more than a big paycheck. My parents exchanged a look. The kind of look that said everything without saying anything. Later, when David was in the bathroom, my mother pulled me aside. He seems very nice, sweetheart. But you have to think about your future. About the life you want to build. The life I wanted to build. Not the life we wanted to build together. The life I wanted to build for myself. A life that required a certain income level. A certain social status. A certain type of man. I broke up with David 2 weeks later. Told him I wasn't ready for anything serious. The truth was, I wasn't ready to defend my choices to my parents. I wasn't ready to love someone they didn't approve of. I was 32 and still trying to earn love I thought I already had. March 15th. That's the day everything changed. Though if I'm being honest, the change had been building for months. Maybe years. I'd been feeling restless at work. Henderson and Associates had been good to me, but after 6 years, I was starting to feel like I was sleepwalking through my days. The clients were demanding. The hours were brutal. The work that had once excited me felt mechanical. I'd been having lunch with my friend Karen from college, telling her about my dissatisfaction, when she said something that stuck with me. You know, Sarah, you talk about your job like it's a prison sentence. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to? I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I honestly couldn't remember. Every decision I made was filtered through the same question: would this make my parents proud? Would this contribute to the image of success I'd been building my entire life? I'd been thinking about making a change. Maybe moving to a smaller firm. Maybe taking a pay cut to work somewhere that aligned more with my values. Maybe finally pursuing the nonprofit work I'd always been curious about, but I hadn't acted on any of these thoughts. Because making less money meant sending less money home. And sending less money home meant disappointing the people who'd invested everything in my success. I'd been at Henderson and Associates for 6 years. Senior account manager. Client list that included 3 Fortune 500 companies. My boss, Janet, had been dropping hints about a promotion. Vice president level. I'd already started mentally spending the raise. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. I'd prepared a presentation about the new clients I'd brought in. Had rehearsed talking points about my contribution to the company's growth. Had even bought a new blazer for the occasion. Sarah, I need to see you in my office. Janet's voice was different that day. Careful. Like she was handling something fragile. Her office smelled like the lavender plug-in she'd installed the month before. The same office where I'd gotten my last 2 promotions. The same office where I'd negotiated my current salary. The same office where I'd built my entire professional identity. We're restructuring the department. I need to talk to you about some changes. Changes. Not promotions. Not expansions. Changes. The company's been struggling. We lost the Morrison account last month. And the Peterson contract is up for renewal, but they're talking about going with a smaller firm. I knew about Morrison. Had heard through the office grapevine that they'd been unhappy with our campaign. But Peterson? That was news to me. We're going to have to downsize. Significantly. And I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let you go. The words didn't compute. At first. Let me go? Me? The good daughter who never failed at anything? The success story who'd never been anything but perfect? I know this is shocking. You've been one of our best performers. But with the budget cuts, we can't justify keeping senior level positions when we're losing clients. But the promotion. You said, I know. I'm sorry. I was hoping we could make it work. But the numbers just don't add up. Janet slid a folder across her desk. There's a severance package. 3 months. And I'll write you the strongest recommendation letter you've ever seen. 3 months. 90 days to find a new job in a market that had become increasingly brutal. 90 days to figure out how to tell my parents that their investment in my success had just been liquidated. I signed the paperwork in a daze. Cleared out my desk while my coworkers pretended not to stare. Walked out of the building that had been my second home for 6 years, carrying a cardboard box of personal items like some cliché from a movie. The subway ride home was a blur. I remember staring at my reflection in the train window, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. I was the reliable one. The successful one. The one who did everything right. I drove home in a daze. Sat in my Brooklyn apartment staring at the stack of bills on my kitchen counter. Rent. Student loans. Car payment. Utilities. Groceries. And that automatic transfer. The one that sent $800 to my parents' account on the first of every month. With my severance, I could probably manage my own expenses for about 4 months. 5 if I was careful. But there was no room in that budget for the monthly payments to my parents. No room for the extra money I sent for emergencies. No room for the Christmas bonuses or the vacation contributions. I called my mother first. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. She'd be home from her shift at the library, probably making tea and watching her soap operas. Hello, sweetheart. How was your day? Such a simple question. Such a loaded answer. Mom, I need to tell you something. I lost my job today. The silence was immediate. Complete. The kind that stretches long enough to make you wonder if the call dropped. Oh my. Are you okay? I'm okay. I have severance. I'll figure something out. Of course you will. You're so capable. I'm sure this is just temporary. Temporary. Like a minor inconvenience. Like a brief pause in the regularly scheduled program of my success. Mom? Yes, honey? I might need to. I might not be able to send money for a while. Just until I get back on my feet. The pause was longer this time. I could hear the television in the background. Could picture her sitting in her favorite chair, processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Cooler. More distant. Well, we'll figure something out. Your father and I. We always do. We always do. Not, we'll get through this together. Not, don't worry about us. We always do. Like I was already written out of the equation. I love you, Mom. Love you too, sweetheart. Call us when you have some good news. She hung up before I could respond. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not the frustrated tears of a bad day at work. Not the stressed tears of a difficult client. Deep, body-shaking sobs that felt like they were coming from some place I'd buried long ago. I realized I was grieving. Not just the job. Not just the money. I was grieving the myth I'd built my entire identity around, the myth that I was loved for who I was, not what I provided. The silence that followed would teach me more about love than 32 years of trying to earn it ever did. The next few weeks were a masterclass in conditional affection. My parents' calls became less frequent. When they did call, the conversations felt different. Stilted. Like we were all reading from a script no one had bothered to rehearse. Their questions about my job search felt more like interrogations than support. How many applications had I submitted? What was my timeline for getting back to work? Had I considered taking a temporary position just to get some income flowing? Not for me. For them. I found a new job in June. Not the corner office I'd had before. Not the salary I'd been making. But steady. Respectable. A marketing coordinator position at a nonprofit in Queens, the Young Women's Leadership Foundation. They worked with girls from low-income families, helping them navigate the college application process. Providing mentorship and resources and the kind of support I'd never needed because I'd had parents who understood the system. The work was meaningful in a way my corporate job had never been. I was helping teenage girls who reminded me of myself at that age. Bright, ambitious, desperate to make their families proud. But unlike me, they didn't have the luxury of being perfect. They had to overcome obstacles I'd never faced. The pay cut was significant. I went from making $110,000 a year to making $55,000. After taxes, after rent, after my own bills, there wasn't much left over. Certainly. Not enough to resume the monthly payments to my parents. I dreaded making the call, but I knew I had to. It was mid-June, and I'd been at my new job for 2 weeks. Long enough to understand what my new budget would look like. Long enough to know that my parents' expectations were about to collide with my reality. Mom, I got a job. Oh, thank goodness. We've been so worried. Where? It's a nonprofit. The Young Women's Leadership Foundation. I'm really excited about it. That's wonderful, honey. And the salary? There it was. The question that mattered most. Not what I'd be doing. Not whether I was happy. Not whether the work was fulfilling. Just the bottom line. It's less than what I was making before. But I'll be doing meaningful work. Helping girls from low-income families get into college. That's nice, dear. And you'll be able to get back to normal? With the help you were giving us? Normal. As if sending them money every month was the natural order of things. As if my value as a daughter was measured by direct deposit. I won't be able to send as much. Maybe half of what I was sending before. Maybe less. The silence stretched. I could hear my father's voice in the background, asking what I'd said. Could hear my mother's muffled response. Could feel the disappointment radiating through the phone. Well, I suppose we'll have to make do. Make do. Like I was some luxury. They'd have to sacrifice. I'm sorry, Mom. I know it's not what you wanted to hear. It's not about what we want, Sarah. It's about what we need. Your father's arthritis is getting worse. The medication isn't covered by insurance. We were counting on. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I was 32 years old, and I was being guilt-tripped for not making enough money to subsidize my parents' retirement. This was the moment everything shifted. When I realized that love shouldn't come with a price tag, I hung up the phone and made a decision. Not a dramatic one. Not a declaration of independence or a burning of bridges. Just a quiet, internal shift. I was done auditioning for love. The monthly payments stopped. Not as a punishment or a statement. Simply because I couldn't afford them anymore. And instead of explaining myself or apologizing endlessly, I let my parents' reaction teach me what I needed to know. The calls became even less frequent. When they did call, the conversations were stilted. Polite but cold. Like I was a distant relative they felt obligated to check on. How's work? My mother would ask. Good. I'm working on a program for first-generation college students. It's really rewarding. That's nice. Are you managing financially? Managing. Not thriving. Not happy. Just managing. I'm fine, Mom. I'm figuring it out. Well, if you ever want to look for something more stable, your father and I know some people. Stable. Code for lucrative. Code for the kind of job that would restore the monthly payments. I stopped calling every Sunday. Stopped texting updates about my day. Stopped sending photos of my apartment or my weekend adventures. I was pulling back. Not dramatically. Not with anger. Just withdrawing from a relationship that had never been what I thought it was. For the first time in my life, I started living for myself. I bought books without worrying about whether I could afford them. I took a ceramics class on Thursday nights. I went on dates without analyzing whether the guy was successful enough for my parents to approve. I was learning who I was when I wasn't trying to be perfect, and it was terrifying. Because without the performance, without the constant striving for approval, I had to figure out who I actually was. What I actually wanted. What actually mattered to me. I discovered I loved cooking. Not just heating up frozen dinners or ordering takeout, but actually following recipes and experimenting with flavors. I bought a slow cooker and started making soups on Sunday afternoons. I discovered I loved hiking. There was something about being in nature, about moving my body without any goal other than the movement itself, that felt revolutionary after years of treating exercise as another task to optimize. I discovered I loved silence. Not the uncomfortable silence of disappointed phone calls, but the peaceful quiet of Saturday mornings when I could drink coffee and read the newspaper without worrying about what I should be accomplishing. These were small discoveries. Quiet revelations. But they felt enormous because they were mine. Not achievements to report to my parents. Not accomplishments to add to my resume. Just things I enjoyed for the pure sake of enjoying them. The first sign that my parents were fighting back came in August. A text from my mother that was designed to look casual but felt like a carefully crafted weapon. Saw Jennifer Morrison at the grocery store today. She mentioned that Emma got promoted to senior manager at her consulting firm. 6-figure salary now. So proud of her success. Hope you're doing well at your new job. Emma Morrison had been my high school rival. The girl who'd finished second in our class while I finished first. The girl who'd gotten into her second choice college while I'd gotten into my first. The girl my parents had always compared me to when they wanted me to push harder, but Emma had made different choices. She'd gone to business school. Climbed the corporate ladder. Married a doctor. Bought a house in the suburbs. Done everything right according to the playbook my parents had written for successful daughters. The message was clear: other people's daughters were still succeeding. Other people's daughters were still making their parents proud. Other people's daughters were still contributing to the family bottom line. That I didn't respond to the text. The next week, it was my father. A phone call this time, not a text. His voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear the agenda underneath. Your cousin Mike bought a house in Westchester. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. His parents are so excited. They're talking about turning one of the bedrooms into an office for when he works from home. Mike was 2 years younger than me. Had spent his 20s bouncing between jobs and living in his parents' basement. Had dropped out of college twice. Had been the family disappointment while I was the family success story, but he'd gotten lucky with a startup that went public. Now he was buying houses and talking about stock options and making his parents proud in all the ways that mattered. That's great for Mike, I said. He's been so generous with his parents. Taking them on vacation. Helping with the mortgage. It's wonderful to see children who remember what their parents did for them. There it was. The real message. This is what successful children do. This is what good sons and daughters accomplish. This is how you show love. I didn't respond to that either. By September, the guilt tactics had escalated. My mother called, crying. Actually crying. The kind of manipulative tears that had worked on me for 32 years. I don't know what we did wrong, Sarah. Your father and we've been talking, and we can't figure out why you've become so distant. I'm not distant, Mom. I'm figuring some things out. It feels like you don't care about us anymore. Like we don't matter to you. The irony was suffocating. They were accusing me of not caring about them because I'd stopped paying their bills. As if care could only be measured in dollars. I do care about you. But I can't keep sending money right now. I'm barely covering my own expenses. It's not about the money, Sarah. It's about feeling like you're part of the family. But it was about the money. It had always been about the money. When I call you, you're always busy. When I ask about your life, you give me one-word answers. When I try to make plans to visit, you have excuses. She wasn't wrong. I had been pulling away. But not because I didn't care. Because I was finally starting to understand what caring actually looked like. Caring wasn't bankrupting myself to fund their comfort. Caring wasn't sacrificing my own stability to maintain theirs. Caring wasn't performing happiness and success to make them feel better about their choices. Caring was setting boundaries. Caring was being honest about my limitations. Caring was refusing to enable a dynamic that was hurting all of us. The emotional manipulation was just getting started. October brought the nuclear option. A call from my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. Linda had always been the family peacemaker. The one who smoothed over conflicts and mediated disputes. The one who made sure everyone played their assigned roles. Sarah, your mother is beside herself. She's convinced you hate her. I don't hate her, Aunt Linda. I need some space. Space? From your family? I don't understand. They raised you. They sacrificed for you. And now that they need you, you're abandoning them. The narrative was being rewritten. Slowly, carefully, but definitively. My parents weren't the ones who'd conditioned their love on my financial success. I was the ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned them in their time of need. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just not able to send money right now. It's not about the money, Sarah. It's about respect. About remembering where you came from. But it was about the money. It was always about the money. Your parents are getting older. They won't be around forever. Is this really how you want to spend what could be your last years together? The manipulation was expert level. Guilt about mortality. Guilt about time. Guilt about the possibility that I might regret this decision someday. I love my parents, Aunt Linda. But I can't keep living my life to meet their expectations. What expectations? They just want to know that you care about them. They want me to send money every month. They want me to have a job that pays enough to support them. They want me to be successful enough to make them proud. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with parents wanting their children to succeed? Nothing. There was nothing wrong with wanting your children to succeed. But there was something deeply wrong with making love conditional on that success. By November, I'd been cut off from most family gatherings. My cousin's wedding invitation was mysteriously lost in the mail. Thanksgiving plans were discussed around me, not with me. Christmas was approaching, and no one had mentioned what the plans were. I was being slowly erased from the family narrative. The good daughter who'd become the ungrateful one. The success story who'd become the cautionary tale. I spent Thanksgiving alone in my apartment, eating Chinese takeout and watching old movies. And for the first time in years, I felt peaceful. No performance anxiety. No pressure to be impressive. No need to justify my choices or defend my decisions, just quiet. Just me. Just the strange, unfamiliar feeling of being enough exactly as I was. December brought the breaking point I didn't know I needed. My father had a minor heart episode. Not a heart attack, the doctors said, but enough to require a hospital stay and some expensive tests. Stress-induced. Probably related to his arthritis. Medication. Nothing life-threatening, but scary enough to send my mother into full panic mode. She called me at work, hysterical. "Sarah, you need to come home. Your father, he's in the hospital. He's asking for you." I could hear the fear in her voice. Real fear, not the manipulative kind she'd been using for months. My father was 73. He'd had high blood pressure for years. He smoked until he was 50, drank too much beer, ate too much red meat. A heart episode wasn't exactly shocking. I took 2 days off work and drove to Chicago. 5 hours of highway and rest stops and terrible coffee. 5 hours of trying to prepare myself for whatever I was about to walk into. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and fear. My father was in room 312, hooked up to monitors and looking smaller than I remembered. Frielier. Older. "Sarah." His voice was weak, but his eyes were alert. "You came." "Of course I came, Dad." I sat in that sterile hospital room, holding my father's hand while he slept, listening to my mother catalog all the bills they'd be facing. The ambulance ride. The emergency room fees. The tests and scans and specialist consultations. The insurance. "We'll cover most of it, but the deductible alone is $3,000. And if he needs surgery," she was looking at me expectantly. Waiting for me to offer. Waiting for me to save the day like I always had. "I'm sorry, Mom. I wish I could help more." "More? Sarah, you haven't helped at all. Not in months." "I've been helping in other ways. I've been calling. I've been here when you needed me." "That's not the same thing, and you know it." There it was. The truth, finally spoken out loud. My presence, my love, my emotional support, none of it mattered. Only the money mattered. "What are you saying, exactly?" "I'm saying that we raised you to be successful. We supported you through college. We believed in you when no one else did. And now that we need you to return the favor, you're nowhere to be found." Return the favor. As if parenting was a business transaction. As if love was a loan that eventually came due. "I didn't ask you to raise me, Mom. That was your choice. Your responsibility. How dare you? How dare you throw our sacrifices back in our faces?" "I'm not throwing anything back. I'm saying that children don't owe their parents a lifetime of financial support because they were raised." The fight that followed was brutal. Not because we were screaming, but because we were finally telling the truth. My mother laid out her expectations clearly. I was the successful daughter. The one who'd made it. The one who was supposed to take care of them. I laid out my reality just as clearly. I was a 32-year-old woman trying to build her own life. I couldn't sacrifice my future to subsidize their comfort. "We gave you everything," she said. "Everything we had. We went without so you could have opportunities we never had. I'm grateful for that. But gratitude doesn't mean I owe you my entire paycheck for the rest of my life. Not your entire paycheck. Just enough to help. Just enough to show that you care." "I do care. But I can't keep proving it with money." The conversation ended with my mother telling me to leave. To not come back until I was ready to be the daughter they'd raised me to be. I left the hospital room and never went back. This was the moment I realized that some relationships can't be salvaged. Some love isn't worth fighting. 4.2 weeks later. I did something I'd never imagined I'd need to do. I filed for a restraining order, not because my parents were physically threatening me, but because the emotional manipulation had escalated to harassment. Daily calls demanding money. Emails detailing their financial struggles. Text messages designed to make me feel guilty for living my own life. They'd started calling my workplace. Telling my boss that I was struggling with family issues and might need additional support. They'd reached out to my friends, painting me as the ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned her aging parents. They were trying to destroy my reputation because I'd stopped funding their retirement. My friend Karen, the one who'd asked me when I'd last done something just because I wanted to, was the one who suggested the restraining order. "Sarah, this isn't normal. Parents don't harass their children's employers. They don't try to turn friends against each other. This is abuse." Abuse? I'd never thought of it that way. But she was right. Financial abuse. Emotional abuse. The kind of systematic manipulation that destroys your sense of reality. The restraining order was granted. Not because a judge thought my parents were dangerous, but because they were disrupting my life in ways that constituted harassment. I changed my phone number. Blocked their email addresses. Warned my friends and coworkers not to engage with them. For the first time in my life, I had complete silence from my family. It was terrifying. And liberating. Spring came early that year. By March, I'd been no contact. With my parents for 4 months. The longest I'd gone without speaking to them since I was 18. I'd expected to feel guilty. Ashamed. Lost without their approval and expectations to guide me. Instead, I felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there. The work at the nonprofit had become more than just a paycheck. I was mentoring teenage girls who reminded me of myself at that age. Bright, ambitious, desperate to make their families proud. But unlike me, they didn't have the luxury of being perfect. They had to overcome obstacles I'd never faced. I started telling them something no one had ever told me: your worth isn't measured by your achievements. Your love shouldn't be conditional on your success. One girl, Maria, was struggling with her parents' expectations. They wanted her to become a doctor. She wanted to be a social worker. The conflict was tearing her apart. They sacrificed everything. For me, she said during one of our sessions. They came here from El Salvador with nothing. They worked 2 jobs each so I could have opportunities. How could I disappoint them? I saw myself in her question. Saw the weight of obligation that had shaped my entire adult life. Your parents' sacrifices were gifts, I told her. Gifts aren't supposed to come with strings attached. It was advice. I was still learning to take myself. I stopped checking my bank account obsessively. Stopped calculating how much I could afford to send home. Stopped measuring my worth by my paycheck. I signed up for the pottery class I'd been wanting to take for months. Bought a plant for my apartment. Went on a weekend trip to Vermont just because I wanted to see the mountains. I was learning to live for myself. To make decisions based on what I wanted, not what would make my parents proud. If you've made it this far in my story, you understand something important about love and family and the price we pay for both. The hardest part wasn't the silence. It was unlearning 32 years of conditioning.